Hi guys, welcome back to Mentor, yet another video podcast. It's great to see you all back again. I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope you're telling all your friends about this channel if you are enjoying it, because I am trying to gain a little bit of momentum on the channel. So any help I can get by spreading the word on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's greatly appreciated. So today we are going to talk about pilots and money, pilots and pay. For those of you who have asked me about this, you know that I normally don't want to talk about pay and terms and conditions at all. And actually, I'm going to keep stating that. And the reason for that is that I don't want this channel to be about terms and conditions, bickering about different airlines or different organizations, anything like that. But I do realize that in order to take an informed decision about a future career choice, you actually do have to know a little bit at least about how things work. So today we'll be talking about that, and so stay on to the end. I'll be giving you my full view on things. I won't be giving much figures, and I'll tell you why in a second. But do stay on to the end if you want to know more about why this occupation is as complex as it is. So, the first thing I'm going to answer is, will you get rich by becoming an airline pilot? And unfortunately, the answer to that is no. You won't get filthy kind of Wall Street banker rich by becoming a pilot. Will you be able to have a financially happy life? Yes, potentially. And the reason I say potentially is because there are a couple of pitfalls out there. And it is not as easy as it seems. It's actually extremely complex. Okay. So, there are mainly two types of contracts that are available out there, right? You can either be a full-time employee of an airline or a private person that has a private jet or any airline business, or you can be a contractor. So the difference between those two is that a full-time employee is just like a full-time employee in H&M or in the mail services or in the military or whatever it might be. You will have a salary, and on top of that, sometimes you might have per diems or flight pay, and that differs greatly among the airlines and all over the world. But anyway, with a full-time employee, you'll be able to have a fairly good idea of how much money you're going to get at the end of the month. Or you can be a contractor. Now, historically, contractors were used as kind of mercenaries that were put in when other pilots didn't want to work, or like during the summer period, or in bases where the other airline pilots didn't want to work. So they were paid handsomely for that. Okay, that was the way that it was done back when I started. A contractor is generally a person that has his own company, and the airline is contracting that company to supply his services for flying. What that means is that the pilot himself, who is the owner and the director in that company, have to make sure to pay all the employer fees, all the associated taxes with his employment and everything. So the airline will have a lump sum and will pay that lump sum into this company, and then the company can choose, or the pilot who owns the company can choose to pay himself salary, or pay for his hotel stays and pay for everything that is costs associated with the company. It has some benefits and some downside. So the benefits are that you can choose, or you can work around the tax system a little bit. And if you have a lot of training costs, some countries approve of having those training costs deducted from your taxes. So it can be very effective to be a contractor and deduct your training costs if they are very, very big, and thus reduce your taxes, at least for a while, a couple of years. The downsides are that you are standing all the risk. The company that is employing your services can simply stop needing your services, and that's it. That's your employment over. You also have to make sure that you're paying employment fees, and that might be quite a lot of money. So be sure that you've looked that up. And also sick pay, stuff like that, is going to have to be paid from your own pocket, from the company. If you're a full-time employee, it's different. They generally, the companies will then pay you uniforms, lots of license insurances, employers' fees, obviously, things like that. But it means that you might have a little bit less money coming into your bank account every month. So pilots have a tendency to look only at how much money they're being paid every month. So a contract pilot would compare his salary, which is what the company is paying out, to a full-time employee's salary and say that, well, I'm getting a lot more money as a contractor, so I'm staying doing that. However, it's not that easy. You know, if you're paying your employer's fees and your taxes on top of those employer's fees, you will see that at the end, people tend to come out with pretty much the same amount of money at the end of the month anyway. All right, so it's depending on what suits you best, your tax situation and so on. Right, so that's one thing. So that's the two most common ways of being employed within the airline business. How much you're being paid, it differs so much between different countries, between different airlines, that it's not really even worth mentioning, okay? However, just because I know you guys are really waiting for this, ballpark figure, talking European airline, look at about 4,000 or 5,000 euros before tax for a first officer, about twice as much for a captain, more or less, okay? So that if you're employed in a small mail company, you might say, I'm not getting even close to those money. And if you're employed in one of the flag carriers, they might say, I'm getting paid way more than that. So basically, very, very hard to say, but those are some ballpark figures when you're a senior first officer and when you're a captain with a couple of years of service, more or less. Other things to consider. The average job, if you have a normal job at the bank, you will go to work on a Monday, stop work at Friday, you will go to work at 9 o'clock in the morning, you'll come back maybe 6, 7 in the evening, well, depending on if you're in a very, like a management position, you might have to work more than that, but you will have set times, which means that your spouse, your girlfriend or boyfriend, will be able to have a job as well, so you will have two incomes, right? If you work in this industry, you might have to change countries. You might work on weekends or on holidays or nighttime, stuff like that, which makes it very, very hard for your spouse in some certain conditions to have a job of their own, especially if you have kids, because the kids have to be taken home from school, things like that. So don't get fooled by a very high salary in a job where it's impossible for your spouse to work, because obviously if you have a very high salary, it will be taxed very high. So maybe in some certain conditions, a lower salary with a lower tax bracket, but two of them, might give you more money at the end of the month, right? Which brings me to the next thing that you have to consider, and that is taxes. In the airline business, you will be traveling between countries as part of the work. You might also have to change bases in between different countries. You might own property in different countries. And all of this is going to have tax implications. Now, back in the day, it was very common for pilots to kind of work the system, to be able to dodge taxes. But this is something that I really, really want you guys to listen to. Make sure that you do your absolute best to pay taxes in a proper way wherever you are based, right? It's very complex. It might, like in my case, I have 3 different tax declarations that I have to put in every year. But make sure that you do it to the best of your capacity. But because tax authorities have a very nasty way of getting back to you. You might be able to get away with it for a couple of years, but then after 3 years, they will come and they will start digging back in time. And you really don't want to have that hanging over you. So that's one of my major points here. Make sure that you pay your taxes. And if you are a contractor, make sure that you know what the rules are for paying employers' fees and things like that. So next thing, training costs. I've talked about this earlier and I'll talk about it again. It's crucial that you keep your training costs as low as possible. And why is that? Well, if you have a mortgage for your training for 130,000 euros, with these interest rates that are extremely low right now, you will still have to pay around 800-900 euros net per month in order to pay that back to the bank. And of course, that would limit the amount of jobs out there that you can afford to take. So if you have a lower training cost, if you have lower expenses to pay, you might be able to take a job that is slightly less paid, but serves you better in terms of your family life. Or maybe your spouse will be able to work, or Or maybe it's just, the only job that is out there. In some cases, if you have a really high training cost, you have to turn a job down because you just can't afford to take that job because of your training costs. So once again, make sure that you do look very carefully at different options on schools. It varies hugely in cost for the same licenses. I've heard about ab initio training that takes you all the way up to instrument rating, multi-engine MCC, at around 50,000 euros in parts of Europe. And that can go up to 150,000 euros also in another country within Europe. So there are huge differences in prices. Make sure you do your due diligence, you check up the school, you check with previous students, see what they say, see if they have gotten employed. And after you've done all of that, you make your choice. Don't just go for the most expensive one, because in this business, you'll come to notice that when we're talking about people's dreams, which it is, you guys, you're all dreaming about becoming pilots, or you are already pilots. And whenever there are dreams, there will be people who are trying to take advantage of those dreams. So keep that in mind when you're looking for your school, okay? So, final point, is it worth it? I've talked about that in my video, life quality of an airline pilot, pros and cons. I think personally that it is very much worth it. I think that my salary is very good for the job I'm doing. I know that there are pilots out there who are very unhappy with their salaries, so there are definitely jobs. I know there are even airlines that charges people for flying, which I think is an abomination. But be careful out there, guys. Make sure that you look at not only how much you'll get every month, but what the total picture is. What is it after you paid your taxes? Or you're going to have to take a second living. So make sure that, and this is something I tell all my students, and I really want you to think about as well. If you get a base outside of the country that you normally live in, try to make a life in that base. Try to get yourself an apartment and live in the base, basically, because if you do have to start commuting, it will affect your life quality. You won't be able to enjoy your off days as much, but it will also be a financial burden because you might have to have apartments in two places and you'll have to travel in between these places. So make sure that you try to live in the base that you receive when you get it. That's if it's possible. If you have kids at home, it's not possible, it's a different thing. But if you can, if you're single, if you're young, then give it a year or two. You'll probably come to like it. That's what I did anyway. So send in questions, send in suggestions. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you around next time. Thank you.